Right, let's talk about wiring your classic Volkswagen. Um, a lot of people have these questions in this car, and I thought it would be a good idea. I've had another video, it's done really well. But I think this is probably the most common questions, is how to fix the wiring on my Volkswagen and how to wire the car. And actually, it's pretty easy after you learn. They're almost all the same. As the years progressed, they just added more fuses, so it becomes more confusing, but it's actually all the same all through all the years, and the colors of the wires are the same and stuff like that. They really kind of made it simple, probably for assembly. So there's but first, before we get into that, we're going to go ahead and talk about the most common wiring problems with a Volkswagen. And because you might be just looking at this to try and fix something and not trying to wire your car, but if you are worried about the wiring being done right, we'll talk about that stuff a little bit later in the video. But first, let's talk about how to fix problems and check for them. The best tool to use to check Volkswagen wiring is either a test light, or if you really are a little more advanced, a power probe is nice to use. But a test light, cheap one, this one here in particular from Harbor Freight is actually a really good test light for a cheap price, and it will get you out of a bind almost every time with your old Volkswagen. Number one, make sure you have a good ground connected, and then test it with a 30 connection. There's two basic things on a Volkswagen. You're going to find everything has numbers and colors on the wires. So if you look on your wiring diagram, these are available usually in color on the Samba. They used to be available on a place called Vintage Bus, but no longer are they available there. I don't know what happened. This is for, is that 67 Transporter. But anyway, you look up your make and model, get the correct wiring diagram, but I will tell you right now that most of the wiring is going to be the same. So what they have is something called your 30. 30 is typically a large red wire with the number 30 on the switch. So if you look here on this Carmen Ghia, all these wires all have numbers. So if you look here, this is the wiring diagram for this part. It has numbers on each one. Same with this. These all have numbers. So I take all my switches out, and then I look at the numbers on them to make sure it's hooked up correctly. Same thing here. These have numbers on them. If you can see, I don't know if I can get one in focus, but there's a number on here, on this side, and there's a number on that side next to where the wire connects. So number 30 usually is the largest red wire, so you're going to want to check your test light and make sure that it's working correctly. A lot of guys will use a voltmeter to check things, and that is not a good way to test on a Volkswagen, because you could have voltage and not have amperage. But if this light lights up, you have amperage. So this leads us back to the most common things that are wrong with Volkswagen wiring. And this is not a fuse you will normally see in a Volkswagen. This is for air conditioning. This is a very high amperage fuse. I think it's a 30. Typically they had red ones and white ones. So you see a blue one in there, probably somebody's done something pretty bad. So the most common thing is this area between where it connects here and the fuse block is corroded, and you might not even see that it is. So you have to take these out, sand where my finger is right here on the end of this, sand the end of the fuse there, sand the end of the fuse here, clean all your fuse connections where the holes where they fit into the fuse block. So let's see if I can get this one out. I know Dale was working on this. Those little holes there, I don't know if I can get you guys in here. These little holes here where these fuses connect inside there, make sure that you have a good connection there. Now what you do is you put the fuse in and you test it with the test light on both sides of the connector. So you'll test this side of the connector and you test this side of the connector, and that'll tell you if your fuse has connection by testing this side and this side. If you follow what I'm saying, both sides of where the fuse is connected. The other most common thing that happens is if you see something weird happening with your lights, if you step on your brakes and the taillights come on, or something very strange like that, or you turn on your turn signals and all your lights kind of flash, or something weird, typically that is always going to be a bad ground. On your bug, that's going to be usually where the taillight bolts on the fender on the inside. You're going to need to take the bolts off and clean it really good. Sometimes I actually make a separate ground and connect it to there. Make sure it's properly grounded. On the Carmen Ghia, it's going to be making sure that these bolts here ground properly. Sometimes, like I said, I'll use a separate ground. I'll go from this bolt and then drill a little hole in my tail light and run a separate wire over there to make sure it's grounded, and I test it with the test light. The other very common thing is you see that little nub on the bulb. When that goes into the bulb holder and it pulls back, the connection between that little nub and the bulb holder, there's supposed to be connection where that little nub is. Okay, the bulb holder holds the bulb in place, and the very end of that, you want to sand the connection there. Almost always those are 99% of your issues with your Volkswagen wiring, why something doesn't work. You don't know how many times I've taken out those bulbs and put them back in and tested them over and over and over, and thought I got all the sanding done on that little connection on that bulb and had it still not work. So my thing is, make sure you take it out several times, test it, get your test light, test the connector in the where the bulb goes, and make sure that it has power. And 90% of the time, that will solve almost every issue with your old Volkswagen. All right, let's look at this 54 here. This is called a screw terminal connector, and if you can see, there's numbers on there, but they're dirty right now for all the connections. So it'll show you, I can't even read that. Let me even get up closer. There's numbers on there, but they're covered in dirt. But on all the switches, there's numbers. What you'll find is these connectors usually don't have as many issues with bad connection. But the slip-on connectors always had problems with connection. One of the things I always keep around is some of this Tarnex. Make sure that you rinse this stuff. It says wipe and rinse. Make sure you rinse it off after you put it on. It will just keep, the acid will just keep going, and you know, you'll wipe out all your terminals if you don't rinse this off. Make sure you rinse it. But this stuff works really good to get rid of that. You can even throw your fuses in this stuff for 2 or 3 seconds and then rinse them off. It'll really stop that corrosion and get it off there. Another thing you can do to make sure that you don't have bad connections is take off all your slip-on connectors. Like I said, dip them in that stuff, rinse them off, and make sure that they're not broken, and make sure they're on tight. So make sure that you put them on, wiggle them around, and see how tight they are on the, make sure they're nice and tight. Sometimes I'll grab them with a pair of pliers. A lot of times they'll just break, and I'll replace them. So you can use solder and shrink tube and solder them on for a permanent connection. So if you don't want to have issues, solder them on. It is probably the best bet. So remember, take all those connections off and clean them, put them back on, make sure they're nice and the slip connectors go on. You can run through the whole wiring harness. Yeah, it takes time, but it's what you need to do if you really want your VW wiring to be reliable. You know, I have very, very few times that I have an issue with my wiring not having something work. I've had a couple people, you know, I've had like things like the turn signal switch have a bad connection inside of it, and I've also had the ignition switch, an old ignition switch that was good, but it had a bad connection because it hadn't been used in years and years and years. And I've just taken this stuff right here, CRC Electric Clean. They have this at Home Depot, and if you look at it, it's in the electrical supply section, and they also have this other stuff. And the other can isn't handy. I was just looking for it. I gotta find it in a little bit because I need to lube my ignition switch or my turn signal switch with it. It's a lube, and it says on it helps improve contacts. A little tiny thing. It is not cheap. Neither of these are, but they really, really work. If you have a bad turn signal switch, you spray this in there, move it around a bunch of times, spray it out with, blow it out with air. I've had tons of them that I thought didn't work at all, and they work perfectly after I did use this. And then I lubricate them with the other stuff. And unfortunately, I can't find it right now. I don't feel like going on a big search for it because I got to find it in the middle of it here because I got to lube my turn signal switch on my bus. But anyway, those things are the most common things. Let's move on. That is when it comes to lighting. When it's stuff like the horn circuit's a little specific to each car. I did make a horn video a while back, and it was on a 61, which is 60 and 61 had different horn situation than most other bugs or Gias. They had a different type of a contact system on them, but anyway, it's similar to those anyway, so I can't really do that in this video, but the horn can be a little bit more difficult to fix. But in all honesty, to me, it's actually very easy at this point because just after you do it more and more, you get better at it, and you'll start to figure it out. If you use this general rule, always use a test light. Don't use a voltmeter. No voltmeter. Voltmeters will not help you. You'll know if you have voltage. If you don't know if you have amperage, that doesn't help you at all. So first thing you want to do if you're wiring your car, you want to download or print or have the page open. Usually what I'll use is a tablet. You can look up on the samba.com and find the correct wiring diagram for your car, or you can buy the manual and it will be in there. Usually, not always, some of the manuals don't have it, but I can't really be specific on which ones do. I think Haynes has them, Shilton doesn't, something like that. And Bentley usually has everything. Bentley's the best one. So what you want to do on that is, if you look here, let's see if I can get you guys close enough. I'm going to have to get really close to know. If you can see on there, like, so for instance, this is the turn signal switch. It has numbers on every one of the wires that's connected to it. And sometimes if you get the one that's in color, this is obviously in black and white. I'm just using it for an example. You can get it online. A lot of times they're in color. I know the ones at Vintage Bus were, but again, they're not available anymore there. It has numbers that correspond with colors for each wire. So each wire has a number on the switch that it's connected to and a color. So all you need to do is basically follow the color and the number of each wire and hook it up. Now, if you look here on this fuse connector, there's a wiring diagram that's only this. It'll show only the fuses, okay? It'll show only the fuses, and it won't show anything else. It'll show just the fuses. And what it's showing is it's showing you from under the dash what it would be. So it's actually in reverse. So it's best not to use the one that just has the fuses to wire it, because what you're going to find is that it's going to be in reverse, because it's basically you looking underneath your dash versus looking underneath your hood. So for example, if you look from here, this is underneath your hood, it shows, see how these wires are like this, and if I go underneath the dash and I'm looking upward, it's going to be in the opposite mirror of this. So over the years, I remember back when I was younger, I'd be like, hey, how come it's backwards? Well, I figured out they're looking at it from the fuse point of view. So you're looking at the fuse, you know, from the inside of the car. You're looking at the fuses, what the fuse does, which is not really how you wire the car. You wire it from underneath the hood, right? So this is done as it is from underneath the hood. This is the back of the car. This is the front of the car, okay? Because there's the taillights, right? And this is the headlights and turn signals. So what you're doing is you go from the back of the car, you just follow each wire and go over here, look at it, and then it goes through here, blah, 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 and it goes to this item, and it shows a number of where that wire goes. And if there's two wires connected to the same terminal, like here, it'll have them do that. And so that's your coil, right? And then you see here two wires connected to the positive side, and the minus side has one wire going to the distributor. So you just follow one wire at a time and go through the entire schematic and hook up. It's just wires, colors, and numbers. That's as simple as I can make it. And just follow that, and then test to make sure the circuit works with the battery connected. You know, connect it, you know, hook up the wiring first, you know, whatever, and then go through and then double check it all with a test light after you connect the battery. And generally, you will have all the wiring connected right. It's really not that hard. Volkswagen made it very easy to wire these cars because, again, like you see here, oh, this one doesn't really show the numbers on it. This is a poor wiring diagram. This is from, I don't know which manual this is from, but every one I've ever had always shows the numbers on it. If you look here on the turn signals, which this is the ignition switch. Let me get it closer if I can. I can't really. If you look here on the ignition switch, you'll see 30. You see a 30 on there? I can't see it. Looking at a pretty small screen here. 30, 15, and 54 or something like that. And you just, well, that's the headlight switch, so it's not going to be those numbers. Where is the ignition switch? Where is it? I'm trying to find it for you guys. Looking through the lens is a little different. Oh, here, there it is. Let's see where my finger is. No, I'm down here, up there. Okay. You see 30, 15. I know it's the reason I know that is the headlight switch, because I know that it's a red, or I mean a white and black wire that's the headlight. So I see that white and black striped wire and I go, that's definitely headlight. So this is the ignition switch. You see 30, 15, and there's another number, 87, I think. I can't really read it. But I think it's something like that. I just know from all the years of wiring these cars, you know, just like memory, the 30 is always your hot, 15 is with the key on, and this one would be the other one. I don't know the number of it. I think it's 87. Is for when the key is on the start position. So if you follow that one, it goes down to the starter. So after a while and reading the manual and looking at it, you can follow those things all the way around, and that's how you wire the car. And you do it one wire at a time. Yes, it does take a long time. The first time you do it, it'll probably take you 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 days. After I've done hundreds of cars, I've done hundreds and hundreds, I'm pretty sure. I hardly even need to look at the manual. I know where the wires go because I look at the same fuse block, the same wire colors, the same numbers, and sometimes I still need to pull the switches out to remember which one goes where on the switch. So I take all the switches out of the dash, okay, and look at the numbers on them and make sure that they correspond with the proper fuse and connection. And it's basically that simple. It's not really that hard. You got to be patient, and you might have to just plan on spending several days to do it. You're not going to learn it overnight. You're not going to pick someone's brain and have it all figured out, and it's one of those things you just have to do. You have to spend the time and trace those wires one at a time, and after a while, after you've gotten really good at just seeing the same wires and same colors and over and over and over, you start to get to the point where, oh yeah, I know that one with the green, white, and black is turn signal. You just know that because you've seen it 100 times. So that's how you get good at it. And I can't explain this stuff any easier. It's just basically follow the numbers, follow the colors, connect it up. It's that simple. It's all numbered. But you got to have each one of these switches out. So you have to take all the switches out and look at the switch, look for that little number on it. Oh, that's 56A. Okay, that one goes to here. Oh, that one's 30. So I know that one's going to be hot. It connects from here to here. Okay, makes sense. And then this wire goes from here to here, and it jumps up there. So that there's a wire that goes from the turn signal switch, from the ignition switch to the headlight switch, and it's both 30s. So you start to follow the same thing over and over and over, and you get to the point where it's kind of doesn't take much effort, but it does take practice. It just takes time. You have to do it. You have to go through the pain. I can't do it for you. You have to do it yourself. Anyway, I'll talk to you guys in the next video. Hopefully this helps. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't, but at least it'll give you the right direction. Maybe you can figure it out on your own. Talk to you in the next video. Please like, share, and subscribe.